If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper. I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
On today's episode, Valerie pitched The Man Who Knew Too Much so that we can study the speech in praise of the villain. This 1956 film was directed by Alfred Hitchcock from a screenplay by Charles Bennett and D.B. Wyndham Lewis. Now, of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie, but I'm sure we're good with a 1956 movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Simply go to the show's landing page and scroll to the bottom. It's that simple. Okay, Valerie, let's take it away with the speech in praise of the villain.
Alrighty. Well, yes, this is another Hitchcock film. I said in an earlier episode last season that my knowledge of Hitchcock is not what it ought to be. And so I'm going to start making my way through his catalog. This week, it is The Man Who Knew Too Much, and it stars Doris Day and Jimmy Stewart. So let me start with a quick aside. I'm already doing an aside, and I haven't even gotten into it yet. And the reason is because there's an important lesson here for everybody. Back in season 15, we studied Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. And at that time, both Melanie and I praised the Opera House scene because it was really good. Well, guess what? Tom Cruise, Christopher McQuarrie, and whoever else was involved in the decision-making got that scene from this film. The details are obviously a little different, but the setup, the crisis, and the climax, all the same, all the same. This is why Melanie and I keep banging on about consuming stories widely, deeply, actively, and consistently. You never know where the inspiration is going to come from. Now, hopefully, it goes without saying that we need to study within our own writing genres, but novelists can take inspiration from films, filmmakers can take inspiration from novelists, and we can see things in other genres that can breathe life into our own works in progress. All right, so I'll get off my soapbox now. Time for my topic this season, which is, as Melanie said, the speech in praise of the villain. All right, the theory behind this is that no matter the genre, no matter the type of protagonist you use, the antagonist is somehow superior. And yes, when I say speech in praise of the quote-unquote villain, what I mean here is the antagonist. I'm using, once again, the term villain to refer more broadly to an antagonist or a force of antagonism. Now, if you think about a story logically, then this makes perfect sense. Because the antagonist has to be superior in some way, like stronger, faster, smarter. Because if he isn't, your story's going to fizzle out pretty quickly. After all, a story is about a protagonist overcoming the obstacles put in their way by the antagonist or the force of antagonism. Just let me give you a real quick example. If you are writing a sports performance story about 2 tennis players, and one of the tennis players has, for argument's sake, my level of tennis playing, and the other tennis player has the level of Serena Williams. And if the Serena Williams character is the protagonist and I'm the antagonist, it's going to be a short story because the protagonist is going to win really fast. She is vastly superior to her opponent, which in a sports story is the antagonist. So the villain has to be superior. And the way that superiority is communicated is through the speech in praise of the villain. Somebody in the fictional world, somebody somewhere has got to acknowledge the superiority. All right. So now the question is, how does this speech in praise of the villain thing play out in The Man Who Knew Too Much? Well, Melanie, it's very interesting. It's a bit of a head scratcher because I did not find what I was expecting. To have a speech in praise of the villain must be clear. We got to know who the villain is. And sometimes in very nuanced stories, we don't necessarily know who the villain is at the beginning of the story. And it might take, in fact, the entire story for it to unfold as to who the true villain is. That's fine. In those types of stories, you also have a cast of very complex characters. So when the villain is ultimately revealed, it makes sense because there have been many speeches in praise of many of the characters, and it all kind of works out. Even in a whodunit, when we don't know the identity of the killer, we still know that the killer is particularly skilled or particularly devious, or they're praising the killer without knowing the true identity of the killer. There's still something there. In The Man Who Knew Too Much, we think the villains are Mr. and Mrs. Drayton. After all, they're the people who kidnapped Hank, the little boy. And yes, they certainly are villains, but they're not the primary villain. They're merely hired guns working for a foreign ambassador to Britain who wants them to arrange for the murder of his country's prime minister. It's not the British prime minister, it's the prime minister of his country. Now, exactly who this ambassador is, or which country he is from, or why he wants his PM murdered is never ever revealed. We do know that the Draytons are afraid of him because we see their reaction to him. They never give voice to their fear, though, or explain why they're afraid. So they are certainly not delivering a speech in praise of that villain. When it comes to the ambassador, the only thing that comes close to a speech in praise of him is when Mr. Buchanan, who is the inspector from Special Branch, Scotland Yard, informs the McKennas that the embassy is essentially foreign soil. Ben McKenna, the dad, played by Jimmy Stewart, then says, quote, "They can steal kids and get away with it." That is the only line that indicates the superiority of that villain. And I mean, he's an ambassador, so he has a status in society, and there's certainly power and influence that comes with that, but it's not alluded to, or it's not really a thing in this movie. That line, "they can steal kids and get away with it," is all we have. It's not really a speech, but it's all we've got as it relates to the ambassador as a villain anyway. Okay, so let's circle back to the Draytons then. What about them? As far as Ben and Joe McKenna know, they are the only villains. The Draytons kidnapped their son, but even they don't give voice to how crafty or devious or dangerous the Draytons are or are not. I suspect Ben might be thinking it just by the way Jimmy Stewart is acting some of the scenes. It looks like that might be what he's thinking about. And he probably doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to frighten his wife. I mean, after all, this is a man who thinks that his wife is so delicate that she needs to be medicated before she finds out that Hank is missing. I found that a problematic scene. I found many things about this problematic. It has not aged particularly well for the perception of women. Let's just say that. And I found it, a little rich because Jo is, the wife, Doris Day. She's the only character who realizes that Bernard is not who he says he is. She's got it going on. Ben is oblivious until, of course, it's too late and their son Hank is gone. Anyway, just letting it go, Valerie, letting it go. It's a movie from 1956. So that said, insofar as the Draytons are concerned, there is a nod to a speech in praise of the villain. It again is delivered by Buchanan, And he says, quote, "Your son is the trump card these people hold. He's perfectly safe for the moment. If they consider your boy a nuisance, afterwards, I'm afraid." And then he's cut off by Ben McKenna again because I think Ben doesn't want his wife to be upset. Now, here's the irony. The Draytons, as it turns out, are no threat to Hank. None whatsoever. They do kidnap him, which is obviously not cool, although seriously, they had plenty of opportunities. This is the hard thing about, for me, one of the hard things about watching this movie. The McKennas just leave the opportunities for kidnap wide open. There's many of them. But anyway, we have to just go with it. Like I said, in the end, the irony, even though we're thinking the Draytons are the villains, they actually, and they are the villains, they take Hank, but they actually aren't any threat to him after all. And they do take him because they want to make sure that Ben doesn't reveal information he has about the Prime Minister's assassination that they have planned. It's the foreign ambassador, the one who hired them to kill the Prime Minister, who wants Hank killed. So it's the ambassador who's the real threat, not the Draytons. When the ambassador gives the Draytons the order to kill Hank, they actually protect the boy. They arrange it so that he can escape with his parents. So by modern standards, they're kind of toothless villains. And Melanie, I have been thinking about this all week because it's been bothering me. Hitchcock is a master storyteller. Now, while I don't expect him or any other storyteller to hit it out of the park every single time, the truth is that Hitchcock's misses are better than most people's hits. So the question that I have been puzzling over this whole week is, why didn't Hitchcock underscore for the audience how much danger Hank was in, right? Why do the Draytons turn out to be not much of a threat after all? And the only answer that I have, and look, this might not be even remotely accurate or correct, but I mean, it's all I have right now, so I'm just going to share it. The only answer that I have right now is that this movie was made for a 1956 audience. So the Second World War was fresh in everyone's minds. In fact, the First World War was in living memory of a portion of Hitchcock's audience. They wouldn't have needed the horrors to be explicitly stated because they had firsthand experience of what it was like to lose children. Granted, Hank is a little boy, he's about 10 years old, but the soldiers who died in battle were still very young, many of them, and they were still someone's child. So just knowing that there was a little boy who was kidnapped, who was at risk, who was in harm's way, that was probably enough for that audience. All right. That's all I have to say about The Man Who Knew Too Much. Melanie, how did you go with your study of constant characters?
I went really well. So this movie is full of constant characters, which is really good. So, and this is interesting because we're often told as writers that every character, or at least the main characters, need an arc. So when we get asked the question, does every character need an arc? The answer is clearly no. And why I am studying this topic this season is because I came across a book called Beyond the Hero's Journey, a screenwriting guide for when you've got a different story to tell, by Anthony Mullins. Now, in this book, he proves that not every protagonist needs a character arc. And like I said, if you've been around writing circles for long enough, you'll be led to believe that character arcs are essential and your story won't interest anyone unless there's a character arc. But what Anthony Mullin tells us is that this is not true. And he cites plenty of examples of internal change arcs, ambivalent change arcs, and flat arcs or constant characters. So who is Anthony Mullins and why do I want to learn from him? Well, he has written for the TV show Lost. His first short film, Stop, was nominated for a Palme d'Or at the 2000 Cannes Film Festival. He's won Primetime Emmys, International Digital Emmys, 2 BAFTAs, and 5 Australian Writers Guild Awards. So that's some pretty good writing chops right there. And yes, he is Australian, so, bonus points for who. Now, what studying for this podcast and reading Mullins's book has taught me is that the hero's journey and the 3-act structure doesn't always work for every story. And I also realized that there are way, way more constant characters in stories than most writers realize. And in fact, a constant character has a certain level of commercial success, right? Think about James Bond, Temperance Brennan, Marple, and Paddington Bear. Now, when I'm talking about constant characters, what I am saying is that the character remains emotionally constant. They don't make new or unfamiliar choices. Constant characters draw on the same choices that they always make to deal with the conflict or the forces of antagonism that they face. Their beliefs, desires, and values remain the same. Now, Mullins's way of analysing arcs is different from traditional means. He proposes that there are 2 types of characters. There are change characters or there are constant characters. And that there are 3 types of story arcs. There are optimistic outcomes, so the conflict is resolved. There are ambivalent outcomes, so there are good outcomes and bad outcomes at the same time. And there are pessimistic outcomes, which means that the conflict is not resolved. So this season, I'm going to look at constant characters in stories with 3 different outcomes. Now, constant characters aren't just made up for stories. There are constant characters in real life. And I know because I kind of live with a couple of them. So I'm sure that you will have met people who share constant character traits. And these people are stubborn, single-minded, resolute, and most importantly, they change the world around them to suit their needs. So I'm going to say that again. Constant characters bend the world to suit them. They don't change to suit the world. Now, I want you to think about this in story terms. We have said the following many times on the podcast. Stories are about change. This remains true for stories with constant characters. What is different is where the change occurs. So it's external, not internal change. So how do we track this or see this in stories that we read or watch? Well, we look for the decisions that the character makes because decisions tell us what characters are thinking. Decisions are the internal thoughts made external. So if a character makes the same decision over and over again, they aren't changing, they are constant characters. Now let's think about this in The Man Who Knew Too Much. Ben and Joe McKenna are constant characters, and the story has an optimistic arc because at the end of the movie, Ben and Joe stop the assassination of a foreign prime minister and they are reunited with their son Hank. So they have overcome the conflict, or they've resolved the conflict in a positive way by the end of the story. So how do we know that Ben and Joe are constant characters? Because they make the same decisions over and over again to deal with Hank's kidnapping. Ben is the primary protagonist, and from the start, he doesn't like asking for help. And when he gets the first call telling him to keep his mouth shut, and he realizes that Hank has been kidnapped, he makes the same decision. He does not ask for help and he does not tell anyone about it. And he does the same thing when he and Joe arrive in England and he's met by a special branch of Scotland Yard. He rejects the inspector's offer for help. And at the end, when they visit the Prime Minister at the embassy, he and Joe go in alone. So there is no emotional change in Ben at all. The same can be said about Joe. Joe starts the movie with the belief that Hank is her world and she will do anything for him. She ends the movie in the same place. And while Joe does defer to Ben in some instances, this is basically, as Valerie mentioned, a sign of the times, we know that Joe takes action and she makes decisions based on her belief about Hank being the most important thing in her world. But the interesting thing about Joe and her character is, while she makes decision and takes action, but that's because of what we know about her. We learn that Joe has been a successful entertainer who made her own decisions about her career before she married Ben. Joe makes her own decisions in the movie too. When she discovers that Ambrose Chapel is a place and not a person, she makes the decision to go and find it herself. She also goes to the theatre and thwarts the assassination plot. Again, this is all in aid of finding Hank. Joe is also instrumental in locating Hank at the embassy, and she doesn't waver from the plan at all. Her motivations, her decision-making are steadfast throughout the movie. So let's have a look at what does change then. So Ben and Joe meet Lucy and Edward Drayton. The Draytons take Hank. The Draytons plot to assassinate the Prime Minister. Lucy wants to protect Hank from Edward, and then Edward dies accidentally. The assassination plot is uncovered, but no one is killed. Lucy and Edward's fates change over the course of the movie, but they are also constant characters. Their decision-making remains constant, but the outcome and their environment change towards the negative for them. Their external state is different when comparing where they started the movie and where they finished the movie. So there is change in the movie. It's just not characters who have changed. And two unchanging couples go up against each other. They are trying to change the world around them, and only one of them wins. And it just so happens, because it's a positive outcome, that it's our protagonists, Ben and Joe. All right, Valerie, do you have any final thoughts on The Man Who Knew Too Much?
Okay, well, this is an oldie, but a goodie, obviously. And, here's the thing. We can disregard older movies. We can disregard older books as being irrelevant. Or the flip side of that, we can look to older films or older books and try to emulate them exactly. And I think neither of these approaches is quote unquote right. What we need to do is take inspiration from them. Recognize that, they were for the audience of their time. They were for the marketplace of their time. And so there are things that we may or may not want to replicate in our own works in progress now, but there are other things that would work really well. Like Tom Cruise knew this. Christopher McQuarrie knew this. I mean, that opera house scene works just as well in this 1956 movie as it does in Rogue Nation, which is whatever that was, 2000 and whatever. And yes, in Mission Impossible, they updated it a little bit, but it's the same thing. So interesting. Well, in fairness, this is not Hitchcock's fault, certainly, but it took me out of the movie for a minute because I just went, oh, that's the scene we saw. So to me, that's the bottom line here. That's the big takeaway from this. Read widely, deeply, actively, and consistently. In fact, consume stories, whether they're films, plays, novels. Just consume as many stories as you can, because there's value in all of it. There's value in all of it. And there might be an idea in an old story from, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that will work really well in the book that you're writing right now.
Excellent. Well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss Erin Brockovich. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For the power to write a best-selling story, visit storynerd.ca/courses. And to join Valerie's Inner Circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And for more information about my books, please visit me at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.